gospel reading this week comes from Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 to 33. Jesus made the disciples get into a boat and go on to the other side of the Sea of Galilee while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time, the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning, he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost," and they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You have little faith. Why did you doubt?" When they got back into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Right before this passage, the passage we had as our gospel reading last week, Jesus provided a feast for the crowd of 5,000 men, plus all the women and children who were with them. He healed all the people who were in need of healing, who were in the crowd. And then there was a bit of a crisis. The crowd wanted to make Jesus king. After all of Jesus's miracles of healing and providing a feast, the people were then convinced he was the Messiah. However, this humble teacher wasn't what the people had in mind for the Messiah. The people had imagined that the Messiah would be a powerful military and political king who would lead the people to political victory. But Jesus knew this was far from what he came to do. So he quickly got the disciples into a boat and out of that scene, dismissed the crowds, and then he went up the mountain by himself to pray. Surely with the grief of the death of his cousin and friend John the Baptist still on his mind and on his heart. And now the disciples are in for another lesson. Those of you who were on the council last year, or anyone who went to the Lent soup suppers, will recognize this passage. This was the passage that we dwelt in during 2025. And it's a passage that is rich in both telling us so much about who we are and who Jesus is. It tells us about who we are both as human beings and as followers of Jesus. It's a passage that tells us truth about the human condition and about the brokenness of the world. We all know about the storms of life. We've found ourselves and our families in various degrees of storms throughout our lives. But today I want us to think more about the metaphorical storms that the Christian church has faced. Vast changes over the past decades. The church has been caught in a storm. Imagine these big waves. Waves that threaten to swamp the boat with water. Tremendous wind that blows unpredictably in multiple directions with intense gusts. Vivid lightning and crashing thunder, unlike anything we've ever seen or heard. And even though it's the middle of the night, the storm has darkened the sky even further. Only the flashes of lightning reveal the alarming scene developing in the boat, filling with more and more water with each new wave crashing into the boat. The sails of the boat were long ago ripped to pieces, and the oars are of no use as the wind rages against the boat. And this passage also tells us about faith and challenges to our faith. We might wonder if we are like Peter and have enough faith to step out on the water. Could we ever possibly have enough trust in Jesus to step out on the water? Keep in mind that Peter stepped out of the boat while the storm was still raging. Peter had so much faith and trust in Jesus to step out onto the boat in a churning sea. I always imagined this flat, calm sea, but that's not what happened. Or we might wonder if we too get distracted by the storms of life and take our eyes off of Jesus. Is our faith superficial or weak, leading us to sink? I know mine is at times. These are all questions about us, questions about the church, questions about the ways of the world, questions about the ways that we walk through the world, questions about the ways our faith interacts with the world around us. But ultimately, in all these stories that Jesus told and participated in, I want to discover more about Jesus than I want to discover about myself. I yearn to know and experience more about Jesus. Pastor David Lose, one of my favorite preachers, wrote this about this story about Jesus. So the question isn't whether we're caught in a storm, because we are, or whether we have enough faith to walk on water. The question is whether we can dare great things, trusting that Jesus will reach out and grab hold of us, even when we falter. The question is whether we can dare great things, trusting that Jesus will reach out and grab hold of us, even when we falter. Jesus will grab hold of us, even when we falter. This is the question for the church right now, for our church, and for the church in Western Christianity. As society around us has shifted so dramatically over the past couple of centuries, and especially over the past few decades, the church has been left wondering what happened. It's not our fault. Jesus made us get into the boat, like Jesus made the disciples get into the boat. We were traveling to the other side of the lake, just like Jesus told us to do. Then we found ourselves in the middle of a huge lake in a violent storm. We were trying to escape one crisis, and another crisis developed. And we were helpless. There was nothing we could do in that tiny boat, not really fit for the storm that we encountered. The world shifted, and we weren't ready for it. Jesus never forgot about us, though. Jesus is with us in the storm, and Jesus will reach out and grab hold of us even when we falter. But notice that Jesus did call Peter to come. It's a mutual relationship. First, Jesus went out onto the water to Peter. And then Peter got out of the boat to go closer to Jesus. And then Jesus reached out his hand to get closer to Peter. And it has to be the same with us. We get closer to Jesus. Jesus gets closer to us. We get closer to Jesus. Jesus gets closer to us. And the reality is that we are in this storm that we didn't ask to be in. We don't know what to do in this storm. We don't really have the capacity to deal with this storm on our own. But we do have Jesus. We do have the capacity to move closer to Jesus. We can listen for Jesus's voice. And we can move closer to him when we hear his voice, can grab onto his hand when we hear his voice, and we can dare to do great things because Jesus will continue to be right there with us, to grab hold of us, even when we falter. This is the good news. Jesus will reach out and grab hold of us, even when we falter. And with Jesus, we do have the capacity to not only survive the storm, but to make it safely to the other side of the lake. We'll be able to continue on our journey of faith, to continue on our journey with Jesus, proclaiming the good news to people around us, growing in our own relationship with Jesus while we go, and showing the world around us God's amazing love and grace and presence. And so with this good news in mind, what great things can we dare? What great things can we dare, knowing that Jesus will be there to reach out and grab hold of us even when we falter? So I pray that we might have courage. I pray that we might have resolve and that we might have faith. But more than anything, I pray that we might then turn it over to trust in the good news, that Jesus will reach out and grab hold of us even when we falter, because that is what will happen. Thanks be to God. Amen.